Hey guys, it's Brie here at Blossom and Branch Farm, and this is kind of embarrassing, but I am really behind on harvesting my onions. They have been ready to harvest, as you can see, for at least 3 weeks, maybe even a month, and I just haven't gotten to them. But today I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna talk a little bit about how I grow these, and we're gonna take a look at some of the other things going on around the farm. Let's go. We've actually kind of been harvesting from them because as I need them for dinners and things, I just grab them and harvest them. But really, I should have pulled these all out and cover cropped this row a couple weeks ago, but it's just been so crazy busy here with getting the house painted and doing all kinds of other stuff. We just haven't gotten to it. But I wanted to talk quickly about the onions that I grow and why I pick the ones that I do grow. And I usually grow a yellow and a red. And yellow because that's mostly what I use, and most of my recipes use yellow onions. And so I grow the bulk of that. I'd say maybe 75% of the onions that I grow are the yellow ones. The other 25% or so are the reds. And that's because we do have some favorite recipes that use the red onions, and so I do like to have them around. But they're not the bulk of what I grow. I struggled with growing onions for a long time until I started soil blocking. And when I started soil blocking, I was able to start so many onions in such a small amount of space. Before that, it was hard to really justify taking up seed starting space with onions because to grow enough onions really to make it make sense in the garden, I felt like I really had to grow a lot of them. And to grow a lot of them, I had to store them indoors. And before I discovered soil blocking, that would take up a lot of room. As I started soil blocking and I started using the little tiny mini soil blocks, 3/4 inch, I learned that I could start 280 of them in a tray and really start a lot of onions. And that's what we have been doing here ever since. So every spring I start these around January as seeds, end of January-ish, and then I plant them out in early spring about 6 or 8 weeks before last frost, so still when it's quite cold. Can I help you? Do you have something to contribute, or are you just coming to eat the bindweed? The one good thing about Midnight is that he loves bindweed. That's what he's chowing down on right now. And we do have bindweed growing in this row mostly because it's pretty bare. So this is the downside of onions, is that there's not a lot going on around them. They don't take up all that much room on their own. And while when these are growing and the tops are nice and full and green, there's lots of ground cover. There's not so much now. And later in the season when these greens all start to die back, now they're fighting over bindweed. When the greens all start to die back, there's a lot of exposed soil, which gives things like bindweed and other weeds a real chance to grow and thrive. So that's why I'm gonna clear this bed out today, and I'm gonna toss a cover crop in here, one that's hopefully going to be a late germinator, a cold temperature germinator, and that way we'll be able to get a jump on germination and some growth, even though the temperatures are cold. We are right around our first frost time, so we don't have a ton of time, so let's get going. First, I'm gonna harvest and pull up all these onions. I'm gonna cut off most of the green, well, they're kind of brown now, but most of the dead tops, and then we'll toss these in a crate. They've already cured because they've been out here in the sun, so I'm really gonna pretty much skip that curing stage. But otherwise, you'd wanna leave them in the sun for at least a few days to really let them dry out until the skins are nice and papery like they are already on these. And then we're gonna toss them into a cool place to store for the winter. So if you have a root cellar is great. If not, a garage, doesn't have to be a heated garage, ideally an unheated garage is another great space to store your onions. Let's see how many we've got here. You can see in order to keep the soil from being too bare and exposed here where we had the onions, we did put a pine needle mulch around them. I really like using pine needles as a mulch. I think it works really well. It is a myth that it will acidify your soil, so don't worry about that myth. A little bit of pine needle mulch is not going to acidify your soil. It would take many, 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 many years of inches and inches and inches of pine needles to really do anything to your soil. Yeah, because I think I'm gonna need 2 crates. And actually I should probably keep my reds and yellows separate. I've got some more weeds. Do you want this? Get these weeds? All right, I had to go get a second crate for the red onions. And I also just wanted to talk again about the varieties that I'm growing. So when you're growing onions, it's important to select the right daylight. So you'll want to pay attention to what's called the day length if you're ordering onion seeds. So as you're looking at the latitudes from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, so the southern states in the northern hemisphere are actually shorter day varieties is what you'd want to grow there, because as you go north, the daylight lengthens. So when you go further north and kind of in those intermediate latitudes, you'll want to grow an intermediate or long day variety. And in the south, you'll be wanting to grow a short daylight hour variety. And if you grow one that is wrong, then your onions won't bulb. So those onions will just kind of stay those green tops and you'll never get onion bulbs from them. That can also happen if you plant your onions too deeply, so make sure you're not planting too deep. All right, I'm gonna go harvest the rest of these red ones. Now, if you're ordering from a reputable seed source, it will also tell you in what latitude those onion seeds grow well. So I know that these Pattersons and also the Scouts, which I'm growing, are the red ones, and those ones do well in my latitude. So that's why I selected them. I also picked them because they are good for storage, like I mentioned. So these guys will keep all winter. I can use them all the way until spring. All right, now that I've got that harvested, I'm going to scooch back all those pine needles. This is my fancy tripod, by the way. I'm gonna scooch back all these pine needles. I'm gonna get my cover crop in. I'm gonna do peas because they're gonna germinate in cold temperatures and they're gonna help get some nitrogen down into the soil, and they'll continue growing until we get a hard freeze. So I'm not gonna show you that. We've shown you in multiple videos in the past. I will link a video showing you how we do cover crop. I'm gonna go grab kind of the last of my favorite tomatoes and we're gonna take a peek and see how those have been doing this year. All right, here we come over to the tomatoes, which admittedly I have, you know when you get to that point in the season where you don't give up exactly, but you kind of give up a little bit. We've kind of reached that point in that some of these are starting to fall over. They just honestly got really big. Now the sun golds are what I'm used to. This is what I grow the most consistently because I like them the most. I just love how sweet these little orange cherry tomatoes are. In fact, I can't pass by this trellis without eating a couple. Is actually one that ended up being my favorite tomato so far, but it's just so big that I had trouble keeping it trellised on the way that I trellis my tomatoes, which if you watched our video from this spring, you know that we kind of climb them up one string here, as you can see here, and we kind of coil it up and up and up. And these are starting to look sad because we're getting some pretty cold nights. These leaves are starting to curl. We have had a couple tomato hornworm attacks, so you can see they've eaten some of the leaves, but they really just get so top heavy. You can see where this one did split. This one we must have missed trellising because it kind of fell over, but still getting some huge tomatoes. So let's see what we can get. But you know what? I'm gonna grab my scissors because usually what happens with these tomatoes that I love, these huge ones, if I try to pull them off the vine, I usually end up breaking the plant a little bit. So I'm gonna clip them off. We'll see how many we can get, and then I'll figure out what I'm gonna do with them. I think I have something in mind. I do love harvesting the tomatoes because I have them growing here next to this lavender. So anytime I'm cutting the tomatoes, I just get this beautiful smell of lavender. I do love growing them both together. All right, so here's one of them. These are, I don't think I actually named the variety, but this variety that I've been growing this year that I adore is called Pineapple Pole. These seeds were actually from Botanical Interest and I love them. They are pretty sweet. They are, my mouth is watering just talking about them. They have a true tomato flavor, but really sweet. So we've done taste tests across our Black Crim, our Sun Gold, and these Pineapple Pole, and these are hands down our favorite this year, and they're really nice for slicing. So I'm gonna go ahead and see how many more we can get because my kids can eat a whole one each. They do get really, really big, so that's kind of part of the problem with this trellising is that they get so big. So this is the problem later in the season when things start to get really overgrown is, you can see here on this tomato I had some hornworm droppings I found. So it can be really easy to get things like hornworms at this time of year and just not notice it. Of course, it's the end of the season. We're so close to our first frost. I'm not really gonna worry about it that much, but let me see if I can find it, just because it's always a fun little scavenger hunt. We have had a few this year, but they seem to be disappearing before I can do anything about them. So I think either the birds are getting them, or quite possibly they're being eaten by those parasitic wasps that like to use them as a host. I kind of try to let nature take the lead as much as possible here in the garden, so I don't like to interfere if I don't have to. Tomato hornworms can be pretty nasty though, and if you only have a couple tomato plants, you can definitely do lots of damage. Also, look at this, this plant down here on the end that totally has just started growing on the ground. It's given up. We didn't get all of these side shoots trellised, and so there are just a million little hidden surprise tomatoes in here that I'll have to come out and harvest before we get our first frost. Look at this one. I mean, in my opinion, I can just cut this part off, you know. I hate to waste a huge, giant, beautiful tomato like this just because there's a little nibble on the corner, so we'll still save those. I wish I could say that I was gonna turn these into some sauce or something, but realistically, I'm probably gonna pop them in the freezer because then we can just pull them out when we need tomatoes in the winter in soups and stews and stuff and use them that way. But I'm gonna just slice one fresh because there's nothing like a fresh tomato. I like to serve them really simply, so I'm gonna head up to the house and slice one up. I'll show you how I like to enjoy them. Let's go. All right, everyone, so I promised I would show you a couple different ways that I like to use some of this garden produce. So the first one is one that you've probably already tried or made before or seen. If you haven't tried it yet, you need to try this recipe. And I know that for most of us, it's too late in the season. We just got really lucky this year. We had such a late frost. This was the last cucumber that we just salvaged out of the garden. And so I'm gonna make my daughter's favorite salad, which is called tomato cucumber salad. All right, these will all go into the compost bucket. And I'm gonna start with my cucumber and my tomato. You'll also need one of those onions. So you can see I actually do leave my roots on. Yeah, I know that a lot of people say take the roots off to store your onions. I never bother, and it seems to be just fine. If your kids don't like onions or someone in your family doesn't like onions, it's okay to leave it out, but I really feel like it adds something. So I'm just gonna give these cucumbers here a rough chop. There's just nothing as good as tomatoes and cucumbers from the garden. I don't know what it is. Well, I do. It's the freshness. They're just so fresh when you grow them at home. But they're just so good. And we buy them at the store, and the kids just, I don't know, I think they pick up on it too. But cucumbers are one thing, you know, you can kind of get close at the store, but the tomatoes, there's just nothing close. So I've got one of my pineapple pole, which are the ones that I was saying I really like from the garden. And these ones are sweet, but classical tomato flavor. Oh, I'm gonna miss them so much. So I'm gonna cut up a whole one of these. Now the ratios for this are very loosey-goosey. If your family likes more cucumbers than tomatoes, then you can go heavier on the cucumbers. If you prefer tomatoes, you can go heavier on that. It's really, the end here looks a little bit buggy, so we'll put that in the compost. But look at the beautiful inside of this tomato. Do you want to come have a piece of your favorite tomato? I'm chopping one up right now. Do you want a piece? I have one of, ooh. So good.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sweet pea. I love when they eat vegetables and they say thank you. All right, so I've got my whole tomato in there, and now I'm just gonna toss my onion in. This recipe is super simple, so it's perfect for summer. But honestly, even in the off season, sometimes I'll
go buy a tomato and a cucumber and make it just because I crave it. All right, now I'm gonna take my onion and I'm going to just put a little bit. So my kids like the onion in there, but you know, anytime you get like a mouthful of red onion, that's not very pleasant. So I am gonna put some red onion in here, but I'm gonna chop it pretty fine, and that way no one gets a giant mouthful of red onion. Don't do very much. This is just a little piece. Nice dice. Oh, don't judge my cutting, all right? I'm a farmer and a gardener, not a chef. But, you know, in the off season, it's always a little tricky. Obviously, we talk about seed starting a lot and the greenhouse, but if anyone's interested, you know, we'll definitely be doing more cooking type videos. That's something people are into. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and toss my diced red onion in here, and so you can see kind of my ratio of cucumbers to onions. I'm just gonna give this a stir. Now again, the last part of this recipe is where you can kind of get a little bit personalized. My family loves salt, so I usually do a couple generous pinches of salt. Little pepper, though fairly light on the pepper because my kids are not big pepper fans. And a little bit of white wine vinegar, or you can use red wine vinegar, really any kind of vinegar, even if you have apple cider vinegar. Okay, we just moved in and I couldn't even find any of my regular vinegar, so I'm just gonna use a couple splashes of regular white vinegar, and that's gonna work too. Just give it a stir and then give it a taste to see how it is in terms of your salt content. If you like it saltier, add a little salt. If you want more pepper, add some pepper, but really, it's so simple. My kids will eat this whole bowl. Look at this beautiful kitchen towel. Someone sent me, they hand weave these. Oh my gosh, it's the most beautiful hand towel I've ever had. Anne-Marie, if you sell these, please let me know and I will post the link. I could just eat it like this.
I can use this ornamental towel to wash off my hands, right?
Excuse me, I have to go wash a hand towel. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys around here next time at the farm. If you like this video, remember to like and subscribe and comment. And if you want to see more cooking videos here heading into fall with some of our fall produce like our pumpkins, let me know and we'll be sure to include a little bit of that moving forward. We'll see you guys around here next time at the farm.